Okay, we're back, and I have two more files to show you. One, which is the one we're looking at now, is a really good exposure. It actually is really a well-made raw file. Again, if we pull up the info, you can see it's the full original raw file. Has not had any adjustments to it. So it's a good file, but it the highlight and the shadow are so strong that I feel like I need to do some adjustments there. And I'm going to walk you through that. There's also some really great local things that I want to show you here. The second photo is going to be a file that is actually not a very good file. So I can show you both the possibilities and the limitations of working with one of those. But let's get started on this picture of my fabulous dog Dulcie in her younger days. So I love this shot. I love the light. The frame is a little awkward because I cut off her ears, but I still am okay with it. Beautiful focus, all those things that we're looking at. Look at that. We zoom in and her eye is just super sharp. Even the eye in the shadow is super sharp. Her nose is getting a little soft, but that's okay because the eyes are sharp and this bottom area here is sharp. So I'm really happy with this, but I want to do some development to make it even better. The histogram is interesting. It's actually a really good histogram. This might throw you off, but remember that the way this photo works, this histogram is stretched all the way from here to here. It is maybe not, we don't have the shadows quite as high as we'd like for information, but remember that if we brought them up, we would start to clip the highlights, and the highlights are right here, and we definitely don't want those clipped or we can't work with them. So this is actually a great histogram, no clipping on either side, lots of information to work with. Okay, so we're going to start at the top again. Definitely want to do some cropping on this. I'm going to actually be a little more dramatic. Since her ears are already cut off, I'm going to go ahead and cut them off just a little bit more because I think that'll focus on the face and we won't worry about not having her cute little ears in there. So we start there. I'm going to go down and do my local. I don't think, again, I need to do my white balance. And I'm not going to do the exposure because the exposure is actually really good. I've got highlights and shadows. The problem is the balance between the highlights and shadows. So again, I'll skip contrast. But here, I'm going to start with this magical tool, which is the highlights. And I could take this all the way down. I don't think I want to go all the way down, but notice how if I bring it down, I just get so much more detail. Really beautiful look. It looks like her golden coat there. I love that. The second miraculous one is the shadows. And I can bring the shadows up. And now, even though we still have that wonderful dramatic shadow and highlight, they're much more balanced and we can see all this texture and detail in both sides. So this is a pretty dramatic adjustment, but you can see how wonderful that is. Don't need to adjust the whites or the blacks on this. Definitely want to do some texture. We want to bring up those hairs. That's going to be nice. And we also want to do some clarity. Remember, the clarity is going to up the contrast in these midtones. What are now midtones? They were deep shadows. And again, don't overdo that. No dehaze, definitely no vibrance and saturation. I want to leave it right where it is. But what I do want to do is to do a little bit of cleanup and some local adjustment to that one eye. Okay, and also to the collar. We're going to do a couple of things. Okay, so the first one is our healing tool. And we're going to just zoom in. Oops, I always do this. We're going to zoom in and just take a look. She's got this, I mean, honestly, I know this is the beach and this is the way it should be, but this is kind of an ugly piece of spittle. Now, one thing that I tend to do, this is going to need some correction. That's a very strange place to take it from. So Lightroom, you may discover, often makes, and even Photoshop often makes some very strange decisions. So this, come on now, it's not letting me change it. It should let me, there we go. It's a long ways. Sometimes I think I could have actually zoomed in slightly less to make this a little simpler. I'm going to move it up closer. It likes to choose things that are a little further away, but that doesn't always work well. So what I want to do, so notice it's sampling. There we go. It's sampling stuff around there. And I'm going to stop right there, and that will blend that in. That's good. I usually try to do just a little bit at a time. Whoops. I want to be careful. So one of the things that I don't love about Lightroom healing tools, and I am a fan of Photoshop healing tools more so, but we'll make sure we do a couple of these, is because it does make these sort of strange choices. Okay, so there's that spittle. I don't mind if there's a little bit of sand around her. I just didn't like that one. I also don't really love this. This might be a little bit tricky to do. Let's actually go to the clone. Oh yeah, it's going to make a very poor choice there. There we go. And there we go. Okay, so I could do a little bit better on that, but I like that. That just, I'm not just staring at that ugly spittle. Okay, so the next thing I want to do, which is really helpful, is I love, we've got beautiful detail on both sides. We've got lots of information, but I really want to see this eye a little bit more. So I want to go to my brush tool, and I want to make it just about as big. I'm going to turn on the overlay, and by the way, the shortcut for that is O. Make sure everything is zeroed out on my brush, and I'm going to just fill in that eye, and I think that's going to be good. Now remember, with this brush, if you need to, there's a couple things that you can do. I've got the auto mask on, which won't really help here, but you can change the feathering. You can also go to erase and take out areas that won't work. Let's just see how this works, because I think that's pretty good. I've got it feathered, and that whole area is relatively dark. So what I want to do is just raise the contrast of her eye, raise the shadows of her eye, and up the clarity. And I will show you the difference between those. Let's take and go in. You can see I'm in there. Isn't that great? So there's there's the tool, and if I take it on and off, oh, actually, sorry. And so there's the change. Let's go back to the history. This is going to be one of the easiest ways to do this. And we will just go back to add the brush stroke. That was before, and this is after. So you wouldn't know that I'd made that change, but it definitely pulls her eye out. One last thing I'm going to do, and then I'll show you the difficult adjustment. And again, I could spend, for all of these, I'm doing quick demonstrations, I could spend, you know, half an hour, 45 minutes, sometimes a couple hours really working on an image to get it where I want. I'm just showing you some basic stuff. On this one, I would like to go in again with a brush tool, and I want to go in with this new brush tool, and I'm going to actually paint over this. Let me just turn my overlay on so I can see it. Now with this one, I think I'm really got that feathering on too much. I'm going to bring the feather down, and I'm going to grab the erase tool, and I just want to take that out because I only really want to do this on the tag. So I can just erase those edges so it's not quite so much. And I'll go back to the brush and make sure it's small. I just want to get a little bit more on there, make sure it's small, make sure that my feathering is a little bit lower, and just, there we go. Just make sure that's really covered. That's good. Okay, I'm going to take the overlay off, and I'm going to come back into, oh, sorry, I'm going to come to, there we go, saturation. I can change the hue on this, but really all I need to do, I could try that, but all I really need to do is just change the saturation. That purple was just a little bit, I'm just taking it all the way down. That purple is just a little bit intense. Could try changing the hue. I don't think that's going to be so great. I just want to sort of remove that intensity. Okay, one last thing I could do just for fun, and this is a subtler version of what we did before, is just give a slight vignette. Okay, that will do it for this one. Let's move on to the last one, which is really fun. Let's go back to the library and grab this photo. Okay, so now this is, I hope you're noticing, this is not such a great exposure. It's not terrible, but it's a little bit problematic. So this is a raven that I photographed down on Ocean Beach. It is just within the bounds of acceptable. If this had popped over there, that is the raven right there, and that would have been really, really not enough to work with. But we really can do something with it here. Again, we're going to start with our global adjustments, start with our crop. Definitely, I think on this one, I'm going to try pulling up a 1:1. Nope, it's not going to work. I'm going to do a 4:5, but I'm going to switch it the other way. Yeah, that'll work. Just to bring it down tight onto him. Nice focus. I want to make sure you see that, but you can see one of the things that happens, the ISO was at 400, but because he's underexposed, I'm going to have quite a bit of noise in there. So I'm going to have to do some little finagling to take care of that. Okay, let's start with basic. Definitely on this one, we need to take the exposure up. And actually, let's just go ahead and try. I want to see what will happen with the white balance. Let's do that first. I'm going to go on to his beak. Ah, yes, that is nice. That warms it up so that we have a sand color there. Then I'm going to come to exposure. Much better. And you can see, wow, there's an awful lot of detail in here. But the further we go with that, I'm also going to pull up the shadows. Whoops, maybe that was a little bit much. The further we go, the more noise we're going to start to see. And you can see the quality is a little bit off, a little bit of shake. I still like it from here, but I know I could improve it. Okay, so we've pulled the shadows up a little bit. We're going to pull the whites up. This is actually always a really good trick on something like this. And we're going to leave it that way for now. Definitely texture and clarity, two of my favorite things. Don't get too far in the texture, because you can see on an image like this, if we pull that texture over, the noise is going to get pretty terrible. So be cautious with that. And definitely, there we go. Wow, that is making a huge difference already. I'm really liking it. I actually think I'm going to warm it up a little bit more. I know that that's pushing it over what it might have been, but I like that. Okay, now what I want to do, I'm going to leave HSL. I don't need to do any of those things, but I want to come in to the local brush. And again, I want to come in to this area. I want to try to get that a little bit more, but it's going to be a little bit tricky. So I'm going to feather this. I'll show my overlay, and a little bit bigger because I want to cover this whole area here. Whoop. Let's try that again. Whoa, I got kind of carried away. There we go. Let go. Okay, good. That'll work. And I'll take that overlay off. And I'm going to go ahead and this is a cool thing. I actually have been doing this for years and just saw a demo the other day about this. This is kind of a doubling up. You can actually layer your effects on layers by using this brush tool to pull things in. And that is quite amazing. I'm going to go in and really bump up the clarity and a little bit in the texture. And look at how much that's bringing things in. That's quite amazing. Okay. And I can just show you the difference there And there, pretty cool. I'm going to click done, and now I'm going to zoom in, and now you can see the noise has gotten pretty terrible. So I want to go down and use a tool that you may not have seen yet, which is detail. So the detail area, we're going to learn a lot more about this in this course. This is an area where you can both correct your noise and also do some necessary sharpening. So noise reduction is going to actually reduce the noise, but it also starts to smooth it out. So you'll see what happens. We always want to, despite the order, you want to do the noise reduction first. And that looks pretty good. We want to take the color. There's some little color noise in there as well. I'm not going to get into the details of these. This is something to study further, and we'll come back to it. But I want to talk about the sharpening area. Now, sharpening, notice that once we brought this down, we actually softened it again. We did all that nice work with the clarity, and now the noise has brought it down. So what we want to do is use the sharpening tool. Now, I'm going to hit my Option key. I'm going to hold it down, and that means that when I hit these sharpen tools, it's going to convert them to black and white, which actually is really helpful. Now, this is the general sharpening. This just takes the sharpening up and down, and you can see what that does. I'm going to leave that in the middle because what we want to do, that's kind of our overall sharpening. What we want to do is actually look at these two tools, radius, and notice how that gives us a kind of a solar relief. And radius is going to really just sharpen those edges. And then detail, in this one, I actually want to take down because detail will sharpen those grains. The last one, which is really awesome, is masking. And what this does is it masks out the sharpening in those darker areas. Okay, so let me actually show you what that did. That's unsharpened, and that's sharpened. Oops, come on, let's try it again. Unsharpened, and sharpened in with the noise reduced. Very subtle difference, but very important. And if we pull back, that is what it looks like now. Let's go back and just go back so you can see all of the different corrections that we made. This is what it looked like when we brought it in. And this is what it looks like now. Give you the full frame. Quite a difference. Okay, so I hope that helps you with a little bit more advanced and nuanced development and also a strategy for development in Lightroom. Have fun, and see you in the next video.